What if your faith could cost you your life? What if a single dream foretold every empire, from Babylon to the European Union? You've heard of Daniel in the lion's den, but what if that was just the beginning? A teenage exile, a prophecy that spans millennia, a God who never leaves. This isn't just a story about survival. It's a divine thread stretching from Jerusalem through Babylon all the way to the last days. And within it lies a mystery that few have dared to unpack. Today, we journey into one of the Bible's most prophetic books and discover why Daniel's visions still echo in the headlines of our world. The year is 605 BC. The streets of Jerusalem are burning. A foreign army has breached the gates, and among the smoke, a boy is taken. His name is Daniel, torn from home, dragged into the heart of a ruthless empire, crowned not with power, but with chains. Yet in the halls of Babylon's golden palace, Daniel does not bow. He speaks truth to kings. He survives fire. He survives beasts. And through it all, he sees the future. Empires rise and fall, but one kingdom will stand forever. To uncover this destiny, we must first return to where it all began. They say every empire falls, but what if your story begins in the ashes of one? The year is 605 BC. The kingdom of Judah is breaking. The walls of Jerusalem tremble under the boots of Babylon. And the temple, the holy place, bleeds smoke into the sky. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, has come, not just for land, not just for gold, but for the future. He takes the brightest, the best, the young, among them a teenage boy named Daniel. He is not a soldier. He holds no sword, but he carries something stronger, faith. Though torn from home, Daniel walks with God. Even in exile, the Bible tells it plainly, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. See Daniel 1:2. This wasn't just politics, it was prophecy. Centuries earlier, the prophet Jeremiah had warned, this whole land will be a desolation, and these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Jeremiah 25:11. And now, those words were coming true. Judah had turned away, and God had handed them over. Daniel didn't choose this. He didn't ask for exile, but here he was, dragged 900 miles from the city of God into the palace of a pagan king. Imagine that. A teenager, far from home, stripped of his name, given a new one, Belteshazzar, taught a new language, forced into a new culture, fed from the king's own table, food likely offered to idols. Everything around Daniel said, forget who you are, forget your God, become one of us. But Daniel remembered, even in Babylon, he had no temple to pray in, no scrolls to study, no priest to guide him. But he had something no empire could steal, conviction. This is where faith begins, not on the mountaintop, but in the valley, not in victory, but in loss. Daniel's story reminds us faith is not forged in comfort. It is tested in fire, in foreign lands, in unfamiliar rooms, when you're outnumbered, outspoken, and out of place. Daniel was all of these, yet he stood firm. Why? Because Daniel didn't see Babylon as the end. He saw it as the beginning, a place where God was still at work. Even in judgment, God had a plan, and that's the miracle. Not that Daniel survived, but that he believed before he saw. He didn't need a miracle to stay loyal. His loyalty was the miracle. Some of us are waiting for God to rescue us from the Babylon around us. But what if he's asking us to remain faithful within it, like Daniel did? Here's the lesson. God is still God, even when everything else changes. Faithfulness doesn't wait for comfort. It begins in crisis. But Daniel's story doesn't stop here. This was just his first test. A harder one is coming, and this time his life will hang in the balance. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought at the dinner table. Daniel wasn't facing a sword, not yet. No furnace, no lions, just a meal. But that meal would become his first test. Babylon had changed his name, taught him its language, surrounded him with luxury, and now they offered him the king's food, the best meat, the richest wine, a feast fit for royalty. But Daniel didn't see a gift. He saw a trap. The food had likely been offered to idols, prepared in ways forbidden by the law of Moses. To eat it would mean compromise, not just dietary, but spiritual. So Daniel made a choice. He drew a line, quietly, respectfully, but firmly. The Bible says Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine he drank. Daniel 1:8. It was just food, but to Daniel it was a matter of the heart. So he approached the official in charge, not with anger, not with protest, but with humility and wisdom. "Please," he said, "test your servants for 10 days. Give us vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with the others." Daniel 1:12-13. A bold request in a hostile empire with everything in the line. But Daniel trusted more than just a diet. He trusted God. And the official agreed. 10 days, no meat, no wine, just vegetables, just faith. Now imagine the pressure. Others feasting like princes. Daniel and his friends eating quietly, drinking only water, being watched. One wrong outcome, and it could be over. But after 10 days, something unexpected happened. Daniel and his friends looked healthier, stronger, full of life. The official was stunned, and from that day forward, he allowed them to eat as they had requested. It was a small act of obedience, but it opened a door to greater influence because God was watching and God was pleased. Daniel 1:17 says, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Faith had opened the way. Obedience had unlocked the favor. This is where the story gets real for us. You see, Daniel didn't wait for a big crisis to prove his loyalty. He was faithful in the small things when no one was watching, and that made all the difference. In today's world, the food may look different, but the test is the same. Culture invites us daily. Eat what we eat. Think how we think. Bow where we bow. Compromise rarely starts in public. It begins in private, in small choices, at quiet tables. Daniel shows us something powerful. You can live in Babylon, but not become Babylon. You can work in its systems, learn its language, even rise in its ranks, without losing who you are. In a modern world like ours, with screens, trends, and pressure, Daniel's choice still echoes. He didn't rebel. He didn't withdraw. He stayed engaged, but remained anchored. His identity wasn't shaped by culture, but by covenant. Here's the lesson. The courage to stand begins in the courage to say no. God honors those who honor Him, even in the smallest acts of faith. But the story doesn't stop here. Daniel's faith will soon be tested in ways no diet can fix. And this time, it won't be about food. It will be about death, dreams, and the destiny of empires. What if one dream could predict the rise and fall of every empire? One night, the king of Babylon couldn't sleep. Nebuchadnezzar, mighty, feared unstoppable, was haunted. He had seen something in a dream, something he couldn't forget, and it terrified him. But here's the twist. He didn't just want an interpretation, he demanded the impossible. "Tell me the dream itself," he said. "Then tell me what it means, or I'll have you all killed." Daniel 2:5. Magicians, enchanters, scholars, no one could do it. No one even tried. "No man on earth can do this," they cried. Daniel 2:10. And they were right. But one man knew the God of heaven, Daniel, still young, still in exile, still faithful. He didn't panic. He prayed. He gathered his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and they cried out to the Lord. And then, in the quiet of the night, a mystery was revealed. Daniel awoke in awe and praised the God who speaks through dreams. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. Daniel 2:21-22. Then Daniel stood before the most powerful man on earth and told him everything. "No wise man can do what you've asked," Daniel said, "but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." Daniel 2:28. And with that, he described the dream perfectly. Before the king said a single word. "You saw a great statue," Daniel began, "shining, terrifying, towering." Daniel 2:31-33. "Its head, pure gold, its chest and arms, silver, its belly and thighs, bronze, its legs, iron, its feet, iron mixed with clay. Then stone, cut without human hands, came crashing down. It struck the feet, and the entire statue shattered into dust. The wind swept it away, and the stone grew into a great mountain that filled the whole earth. A dream unlike any other." But what did it mean? Daniel told him, "You, O king, are the head of gold. The Babylonian Empire, glorious, golden, powerful. After you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to you. The Medo-Persian Empire, strong, but not as splendid. Then a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. The Greek Empire, swift, far-reaching, led by Alexander the Great. Then a fourth kingdom, strong as iron. The Roman Empire, brutal, vast, unyielding, but its feet are mixed with clay, divided, partly strong, partly weak. Nations rising, falling, merging. Some see echoes of this today in alliances, unions, and coalitions, from ancient Rome to modern Europe to global powers trying to hold together fractured worlds. The climax wasn't in gold or empires, it was in the stone. A rock, uncut by human hands, struck the statue, not at the head, but at the feet, and everything built by man crumbled. Daniel said, "In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed." Daniel 2:44. Not made by men, not built by war, but by God himself. A kingdom that lasts forever. This dream wasn't just about Babylon or Persia or Greece or Rome. It was a map, a prophetic timeline of human history. And in every age, from golden thrones to iron boots, God was still writing the story. Here's the lesson. Empires rise, but they fall. Only God's kingdom stands forever. We can build towers, governments, nations, but in the end, they're just statues with feet of clay. So where will you place your trust? In the power of men or in the rock that will never crumble? But the story doesn't stop here. Daniel's boldness will take him deeper into power and deeper into danger. And soon a furnace will blaze and another test will burn. What kind of faith stands when the fire is real? What kind of heart says yes to God, even if it means death? The empire had changed, but the spirit of pride hadn't. King Nebuchadnezzar, still restless for glory, built a golden image, 90 feet tall, and placed it in the plain of Dura. Then came the decree, when the music plays, you bow. All nations, all people, all tongues. Daniel 3:4-6. Anyone who refused, burned alive. The music played, the crowd fell. But 3 young men stayed standing, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. They didn't protest, they didn't argue, they just didn't bow. The officials rushed to accuse them, and Nebuchadnezzar, furious. Is it true you won't bow? He demanded. I'll give you one more chance. If you refuse, I'll throw you into the furnace. And what God can rescue you then? Daniel 3:14-15. Silence, then courage. The 3 replied, O king, we do not need to defend ourselves. If we are thrown into the fire, our God is able to deliver us. But even if he does not, we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image. Daniel 3:17-18, even if he does not. That's the kind of faith that doesn't burn. Not transactional, not conditional, but real. The king's rage boiled over. Heat the furnace 7 times hotter, he shouted. Strong soldiers tied the 3 men and threw them in. The flames were so fierce, they killed the ones who got too close. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego fell into the fire, bound, alone, or so it seemed. Then something happened. Nebuchadnezzar jumped to his feet. Didn't we throw 3 men in? He asked. Yes, O king, but I see 4 walking in the fire, unbound, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Daniel 3:24-25. The fire didn't consume them because they weren't alone. There was someone else in the furnace, someone who didn't burn, someone who walked with them in the heat. Some call it a Christophany, a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus, a glimpse of the Messiah long before Bethlehem. In the middle of the fire, the Son of God stood with his faithful ones. Nebuchadnezzar called out, trembling, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come out. They walked out, not a hair singed, not a scorch mark, not even the smell of smoke. Everyone watched in awe. Then the king spoke again, not with threats, but with worship. Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants. Daniel 3:28. And he issued a decree, no one may speak against their God, for no other God can rescue like this. Daniel 3:29. Here's the lesson. True faith isn't proven by escape, but by obedience, no matter the cost. These men weren't promised survival, but they were promised God's presence, and that was enough. In today's world, we may not face literal furnaces, but we do face cultural fire, pressure to bow, to blend in, to compromise. And sometimes standing up feels like standing alone, but we are never alone. The one who walked in the fire then walks with us now. Faith that stands is faith that walks through fire with eyes on eternity. But the story doesn't stop here. Another king will rise, another test will come, and this time the danger will come from a lion's den. What if world empires were just shadows of beasts? What if a teenage exile saw the rise and fall of global powers before they ever happened? It was the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. Daniel was no longer a boy, but his dreams were far from over. That night, as he slept, he saw the sea, churning, stormy, wild, and then, rising from the deep, 4 beasts, not statues, not symbols of beauty, but monsters. The first was a lion with eagle's wings, then a bear, raised on one side, with 3 ribs in its mouth. Next, a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads, and finally, a beast beyond description, terrifying, powerful, crushing everything in its path. Daniel 7:3-7, 10 horns. Then a little horn with eyes and a mouth speaking arrogant words. Daniel was shaken. What did it mean? These weren't fairy tales. They were visions of real kingdoms, the same form as the statue in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. But this time, seen for what they really are. Not gold and silver, not glory and power, but aggression, violence, pride, the lion, Babylon, strong and majestic. The bear, Medo-Persia, lopsided in power, devouring its foes. The leopard, Greece under Alexander the Great, swift, divided after his death. And the last beast, Rome, brutal, enduring, with a legacy that still echoes today. Empires don't just rise, they roar, they trample, they boast. And that little horn, it speaks of rulers yet to come, full of blasphemy and power, but destined for judgment. But then the vision changed. The beasts didn't get the final word. Daniel saw thrones set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, his hair like pure wool. His throne was flames of fire. Thousands upon thousands served him. Daniel 7:9-10, and the court sat in judgment. The fourth beast was destroyed. Then came a moment that would echo into the New Testament. A scene so defined, it can only point to one figure. Behold, with the clouds of heaven came one like a son of man. He was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. Daniel 7:13-14, the Son of Man, riding on the clouds, an image reserved only for God in the Hebrew Scriptures. This wasn't just a man, it was God taking human form. Jesus would later quote this exact verse when standing before the high priest, right before being sentenced to death. Matthew 26:64. John echoes it again in Revelation. Behold, he is coming with the clouds. Revelation 1:7. So what do we see? Beasts rise from below, but the Son of Man comes from above. Kingdoms fight for power, but God gives authority to one worthy of it all. The throne of God is not shaken by human violence. The chaos of history is not a surprise in heaven's courts. Daniel was terrified. He asked for the meaning, and the angel explained, "These four beasts are four kings who will rise from the earth, but the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever." Daniel 7:17-18. Here's the truth. No matter how loud the beasts roar, God is still on the throne. No matter how powerful human empires become, their days are numbered, and the kingdom that will last forever, it belongs to the Son of Man and those who follow him. We live in a time of shifting alliances, global tensions, and leaders who speak great boasts. But Daniel's vision reminds us God is not surprised. He is not silent, and his kingdom will not fail. But the story doesn't stop here, because one night a hand will appear on the wall, and a king will learn what it means to be weighed, measured, and found wanting. What if your final warning was written by a hand from heaven, right in the middle of your party? The wine was flowing, the music was loud, and the king was drunk on power. Belshazzar, grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, threw a royal feast for 1,000 nobles. Gold, laughter, pride, everything Babylon stood for. But then he crossed a line. He ordered the holy cups, the ones stolen from God's temple in Jerusalem, to be brought into the banquet. And with those sacred vessels, they toasted false gods, bronze, stone, wood, but not the living God. And then the room went still. A hand appeared, just a hand, and it wrote on the plaster wall beside the lampstand, where everyone could see. No one could read it. No one could explain it. And the king? His face turned pale. His knees knocked together. His strength melted. He called the wise men. None of them understood, just like before, when his grandfather dreamed of statues. Once again, human wisdom failed, so they called Daniel. Now, an old man, Daniel entered the hall with calm eyes. He refused the gifts. He didn't flatter. He didn't bargain. You have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this. You lifted yourself up against the Lord of heaven. Daniel 5:22-23. Then he read the words, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin. Daniel 5:25. Mene, God has numbered the days of your reign and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed on the scales and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That very night, as the party roared and the candles flickered, Babylon fell. The city no one thought could be conquered, the empire with walls so thick chariots could ride side by side, collapsed in a single night. Cyrus of Persia entered without a fight. The Euphrates had been rerouted. Gates were left open, and the mighty fell without a sword lifted. The throne of Babylon was empty, and the message of the hand came true before dawn. Here's the warning. It's not the size of your empire that saves you. It's the posture of your heart. Belshazzar mocked the holy. He trusted in stone walls, but forgot the living God. He had history's warnings. He had Daniel's voice, but still, he chose pride. Daniel stood, bold, honest, unshaken, while the greatest kingdom on earth was torn away. And he reminds us, no king is too high for God's justice. No wall is thick enough to block his judgment. And maybe this isn't just Belshazzar's story. Maybe the handwriting is on our walls too. Mene, are your days numbered? Tekel, have your actions been weighed? Perez, is your legacy already slipping away? We chase power. We build brands, empires, platforms. But without humility before God, it all crumbles. And yet, even as kingdoms fall, God is raising up a greater one. A kingdom not built on arrogance, but on righteousness, not carved in stone, but written on hearts. But the story doesn't stop here, because the lions are waiting, and the next test will not be in a palace, but in a pit. What would you do if prayer became illegal? Would you hide it or hold the line? Daniel had outlasted empires. He served kings from Babylon to Persia. He was respected, trusted, and envied. When King Darius took the throne, he quickly saw Daniel's wisdom. He planned to promote him over the entire kingdom, but not everyone cheered. The other officials, they wanted power for themselves. They couldn't find any flaw in Daniel's work, so they targeted his fate. They knew Daniel prayed every day, 3 times a day, facing Jerusalem, not in secret, not for show, but with devotion. So they set a trap. They convinced King Darius to sign a royal law. Anyone who prays to any god or man except the king shall be thrown into the lion's den. Daniel 6:7. It was sealed, irrevocable, and they waited. Daniel heard the decree. He knew the cost, but he didn't pause, didn't protest, didn't panic. He went to his room, opened his windows toward Jerusalem, and just like always, he knelt to pray, giving thanks to his God. Daniel 6:10. They caught him in the act. dragged him to the palace, demanded the sentence be carried out. Now here's the twist. King Darius didn't want to do it. He loved Daniel. He respected him. He tried everything to reverse the law, but it was too late. That night, Daniel was lowered into a pit of lions. Before sealing the stone, Darius said, "May your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you." Daniel 6:16. No guards, no weapons, just lions and prayer. The king didn't sleep, he didn't eat, he didn't entertain. All night he hoped. At dawn, he rushed to the den. He called out, not with pride, but with fear. "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God been able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel 6:20. And then, a voice from the darkness, "My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions." Daniel 6:22. Daniel walked out unharmed, no scratch, no limp, no fear, because he was innocent before God and before the king. And the king, he was overwhelmed. He issued a new decree, not to honor himself, but to honor Daniel's God. He is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. Daniel 6:26. This is more than a miracle. It's a message. Daniel's faith didn't depend on who was watching. He didn't pray because it was easy. He didn't stop because it was risky. He prayed because God was worth it. That's what true integrity looks like. Doing the right thing when no one else would. Trusting God when the cost is high. Standing firm when the lions are real. And today, you may not face a den of lions, but maybe it's the fear of being mocked or left out or passed over. Maybe you're asked to compromise, stay quiet, blend in. But the same God who shut the mouths of lions still walks with those who kneel in private and trust him in silence. So what would you do if no one was watching but God? Because courage, real courage, is proven when the room is empty and the choice still matters. But the story doesn't stop here. There's still one last vision, one final prophecy that stretches beyond Daniel and into our future. What kind of legacy outlives empires? When kings rise and fall, what still remains? Daniel never held a throne. He never led an army. He wasn't a prophet in the desert or a priest in the temple. Yet, he shaped history more than any king he served. He lived through the rise of Babylon and saw it fall overnight. He watched the Medo-Persians take over and still stood firm. Not because he played politics, but because he walked with God. Daniel's loyalty wasn't to a flag. It wasn't to a regime. His allegiance was eternal, unshaken, uncompromised. In his old age, long after the lion's den, long after the furnace, Daniel received a final vision. It was not just for his time, but for all time. He saw beasts rise from the sea. He saw kingdoms collide. He saw chaos. And then he saw him. And behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man. Daniel 7:13. He approached the Ancient of Days. He was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that would never pass away. Daniel 7:14. This was no ordinary vision. It wasn't about Babylon or Persia anymore. It pointed far beyond to the coming of the Messiah, to the return of Jesus, to a kingdom not made by human hands. It's echoed again centuries later when Jesus said, "You will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven." Matthew 24:30. And again in Revelation, "Look, he is coming with the clouds." Revelation 1:7. What Daniel saw in shadows, we now see in full light. And today, centuries later, the world still turns, nations still clash, powers still rise and fall. But the vision remains. Look at modern Iran, the land once called Persia, rich in history, wounded by conflict, caught between past empires and present tension. Leaders change, borders shift, but prophecy endures. Daniel never could have imagined satellites, nukes, or the United Nations, but he saw something deeper, that no matter how mighty an empire seems, none will last forever, except one. His life wasn't just a tale of courage, it was a map, a prophetic thread, weaving through centuries, leading us to the King of Kings. Daniel was taken from his home but never lost his identity. He served pagan kings but never bowed to their gods. He stood alone in courts but never stood apart from God. That's legacy, not a statue, not a monument, but a life so rooted in truth it outlasts time itself. And here's what matters. That same calling is ours. Not to predict headlines, but to live with unshakable faith, even when the ground shifts beneath us. Because Daniel's story didn't end in exile. It ended in eternal hope. So when the world seems unstable, remember the God who never is. When nations tremble, remember the throne that doesn't. When you wonder what lasts, look to the kingdom that will never fall. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Daniel 7:27. And maybe, like Daniel, you were born for such a time as this. But the story doesn't stop here, because your story is still being written. From a teenager in exile to a prophet who saw empires fall, Daniel's life proves one thing: true faith never bows, and human kingdoms never last. Babylon rose in glory, then crumbled in a night. Persia came and went. Rome, the Iron Empire, broke into pieces, and yet one kingdom remains. A kingdom not built by human hands. A throne never shaken. A king who still reigns. And here's the invitation. That kingdom is coming, and you are being called into it. Not because you have power, but because, like Daniel, you dare to believe. So let me ask you this. If we are living in the final days of the statue, will you live like Daniel or fall like Belshazzar? Will you stand when no one sees? Pray when it's risky? Trust when everything is shaking? Because the lion's den still exists, the furnace still burns, and the handwriting is still on the wall. But so is the promise. The people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. Daniel 11:32. If this story helped you see prophecy more clearly or inspired your faith, please like this video, comment what spoke to you most, and subscribe for more cinematic Bible stories that go deeper into history, prophecy, and your soul. And remember, even when kingdoms fall, God is still writing the story.